Hi, Dr. Smithy. This is my 5th time recording this video. I have scared myself after looking at the rubric that my first, final go through was a little bit too all over the place. So I'm going to reference my math journal a little bit more in this one. So I'm not going to read from it, but I am going to look over a little bit more than I did the first time, just so my talking points are more organized and I feel like you can follow along with me better than I did in the first version. I want to start by telling you I was not excited for this class at all. I was terrified when I saw that a math course was on my schedule. I don't like math. Even though I've really enjoyed your class and you've been an excellent professor, I still don't really like math. But I've taken a lot more away from this class than I thought I was going to, and I'm very proud of myself for productively struggling through the material. Like I said, when I saw this on my schedule, I was like, oh my gosh, because I had thought about taking it over the summer when I didn't have school. And I've been a teacher for the past 2 years, and then I was a parapro for 5 years before that. But this is my first year in an elementary classroom. I was the pre-K 3 teacher for the last 2 years. And that's why our last unit that we just went through, the algebraic thinking and spatial reasoning, that has been my favorite unit that we have done so far. That was by far my favorite one. Because when I was in the pre-K 3 setting, I really felt like a babysitter. There were days when I did not feel any type of fulfillment. And that's when I decided, I was like, okay, I have to get in this master's program and get out of pre-K. It's time, because I was lacking that fulfillment. But after going through that unit, I realized now I was doing a lot more than I thought I was, because I didn't realize that algebra isn't necessarily something that starts in middle school. I was introducing algebraic concepts to these children. I did a lot of things with patterns. So AB patterns and then ABA patterns for my students that were ready to move on. Even though they didn't necessarily understand that I was priming them for algebra, I was. And I love that we were doing algebra anytime we generated those patterns, even though we weren't using X or Y. Anytime I got out those pattern blocks and we went blue, red, yellow, and they learned about that repetition, I was getting them ready for algebra. So before I started this class, I really thought algebra was solving equations. I did not realize that anytime we described relationships between things, created a pattern, I was working on those algebra skills with them. So that really made my day, because there were times, and like I said, in that classroom, when I was like, I've got to get out of here. I'm just a babysitter, but not so much. Something I really struggled with before this class was understanding that productive struggle is okay. As someone who really struggled with math, who went through Sylvan Learning Center, Bridgehaven, private tutors, I struggled with math a lot. So automatically, to me, struggle in mathematics was like a red flag. I didn't realize that it could be productive with discourse, students talking amongst each other, talking with your students. Didn't realize that was a thing until all the readings that I did in your class and everything I learned about it. So one thing that I've really started to implement in my math stations after going through all of that is some more discourse, some discussion questions. I've gotten really big on task cards, intentional math stations, intentional task cards. I'm really encouraging my students to talk about how they got to their answer, to talk about the process. I was very big on procedural fluency. You do this because of this, get the answer, get out of there unscathed, memorize how you do it, get done with it. But I now realize that is not the correct way to do it. It's okay to struggle. That's part of figuring out how math works. So it's another one of my biggest takeaways from your class. Using real life ideas when it comes to positive and negative integers. I'm not really teaching integers or negative numbers as far as like adding and subtracting negative numbers, but I utilize Class Dojo in my classroom, and I have started introducing the idea of negative numbers without even really realizing it, because if a child loses a point and they're in the red, they know they're in the red, but now I've started explaining to them, this is negative. You're in the negative points. You have to earn a point to get back out of the negatives. So you're negative 1 point, and once that point comes back, now you're at 0 points. So I didn't even realize, until I realized, and then I started explaining that to them a little bit more. Understanding children's strategies, like I'm kind of building on what I said previously, I didn't realize how important it was to go through that discourse and talk about how they're getting an answer and trying to understand their strategies and learn from them. There's more than one correct way to do something, and just because a student is doing something in maybe a roundabout way doesn't mean it's wrong. And it's important for me to listen to them and understand how arriving to that answer in that way worked for them. And then maybe we can find a way to be more efficient with it. But it's important to understand their why and how they got to an answer. It's so important to meet students where they are and build on what they already know. And like I said, drawing 100 little circles, 4 times to find 100 times 4, it's not efficient, but we can meet them where they are and find another way to do that. But it's important that I listen to why that works for them and build upon that. Using real life examples, I already knew that was important, but I've realized just how big that is, and that some teachers don't use real life examples. They don't meet the kids where they are, like with sports or, teaching fractions to some of my more accelerated students very basically. But we're talking about pizzas and pies and cookies, and that works, and the kids love it. Now, fractions are still very difficult for me, and I did not productively struggle through some of the fraction material. I struggled through the fraction material, but some of the misconceptions that kids make with fractions make a little bit more sense to me now. Like thinking that fractions that have a larger denominator are bigger automatically because they see the bigger number. Learning a little bit more of the why behind that and some of the other misconceptions that come with learning fractions. I took that away from the class. I learned a little bit more about myself this semester. I learned that I am a little bit better of a mathematical thinker than I thought I was. I just needed to change the way that I looked at some things. I'm proud of myself, and I hope that you think I've done a decent enough job of explaining that to you. I'm not good at public speaking, never have been, and I'm not necessarily good at putting my ideas into words, but I have taken away way more from your class than I thought I would. I have really enjoyed it, and I hope I have you as a professor again next semester. Thank you.